Hi, I'm Thomas, and this is Math Course. And today we're going to talk about methods for solving quadratic equations. Before we start, let's go over some vocab words. Some notable vocab words to note include the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is the folder line that divides the parabola into two matching halves. The vertex is the lowest or highest point of the parabola, which is on the axis of symmetry. A minimum point is the lowest point of the parabola, while the maximum point is the highest point of the parabola. Now that that's over, let's go over some methods that we can use to solve quadratic equations. The first method we are going to talk about is solving by graphing. Solving quadratic equations by graphing is the best method to use when the equation has the form of y equals ax squared or y equals ax squared plus c. As our example, we are going to solve y equals negative 2x squared. Beforehand, we are going to create a table of values. In this example, we are going to plug in the numbers negative 2, negative 1, 0, positive 1, and positive 2. Now we just plug in our numbers into our quadratic function. Now that we've got our x and y coordinates, we just place them on our coordinate plane and graph them. The vertex is the highest or lowest point of the parabola, which is on the axis of symmetry. To find the vertex after we have graphed a quadratic function, we just have to find the lowest or highest point of the parabola as stated. We can identify whether it is a maximum or minimum if the parabola either opens upwards or downwards. If the parabola opens upwards, it is the minimum, or the lowest point of the parabola. If the parabola opens downwards, it is the maximum, or the highest point of the parabola. In this case, the parabola is a maximum. Our next method of solving quadratic equations is by finding square roots. Solving by finding square roots is the best method to use when the equation has no x term. For our example, we're going to solve 2x squared minus 8 equals 0. Normally, we have factoring when we have more than one variable. However, in this case, we don't have to use the factoring because we only have one variable. When we only have one variable, we can just use inverse operations. So all you have to do is undo your variable. We can see that 2 is being subtracted by 8, so we are going to add 8. Now we have 2x squared minus a positive 8. Now my variable is being multiplied by 2, so to undo that, we are going to divide by 2. Since 8 divides into 2, we have x squared equals 4. Now to undo the variable being squared, using inverse operations, we're going to find the square root of each side. So now x can equal plus or minus the square root of 4. Now we just simplify. In doing so, x equals plus or minus 2. Our third method of solving quadratic equations is by factoring. Solving by factoring is the best method to use when you can factor the equation easily. For our example, we are going to solve x squared plus 11x plus 30 equals 0. Now we have to find the two numbers that add up to 11, but multiply to make 30. So which ones adds up? So now let's list some factors of 30. Some factors of 30 include 30 times 1, 15 times 2, 10 times 3, and 6 times 5. As you can see, 6 and 5 can add up to 11, but also be multiplied to make 30. So now we just plug them in. In doing so, we have a product that equals to 0. Using the zero product property, x plus 6 equals 0, and x plus 5 equals 0. Therefore, x equals 6 and x equals 5. Our fourth method is solving by completing the square. Completing the square is the best method to use when the coefficient of the x squared term is 1, but you cannot factor the equation easily. As our example, we are going to solve x squared plus 6x equals 9. The first thing you're going to want to do is to get your b and divide it by 2, and then square it. In our case, 6 is our b, so now we have 6 over 2 squared. So now we're going to add 6 over 2 squared to both sides of the equation. In doing so, we're going to write x squared plus 6x equals 9 as a square, and rewrite 9 as a fraction with a denominator of 4. Now we just have to simplify the right side of the equation. Next, we just have to find the square root of each side and simplify. Now we rewrite x plus 6 over 2 equals plus or minus 4.24 as two equations. Lastly, we just have to solve for x by subtracting 6 over 2 from each side of the equation and simplify. Our last method is solving by using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is the best method to use if the equation cannot be factored easily or at all. For our example, we will be solving 5x squared plus 16x minus 84 equals 0. As displayed, we will input our numbers into the quadratic formula. We will substitute 5 for A, 16 for B, and negative 84 for C. Once the numbers are substituted, we will now simplify. Next, we rewrite our equation into two equations, and lastly, we simplify. Now that that's over, it is time for the open letter. Suppose a person is riding in a hot air balloon 144 feet above the ground. He drops an apple. The height of the apple above the ground is given by the formula h equals negative 16t squared plus 144, where h is height in feet and t is time in seconds. How far has the apple fallen from the time t equals 0 to t equals 1? The quadratic equation described in this word problem is h equals negative 16t squared plus 144. In this equation, we're trying to find how many seconds it takes for the apple to land on the ground. In this real-world problem, I used the quadratic formula to solve the problem. In this case, I substituted negative 16 for A, 0 for B, and 144 for C. Once the numbers are substituted, we will now simplify. After that, we rewrite our equation into two equations. Now we will approximate 9,216, which roughly equals 96. And lastly, we simplify. Here we can observe that our answer resulted in a negative 3 and a positive 3. With this information, we can say that it took 3 seconds for the apple to reach the ground. We can eliminate the negative 3 because an object can't possibly take negative 3 seconds to reach the ground. To graph the quadratic equation, we will be using the formula of y equals ax squared plus c. Now we will be making a table of values. Since our quadratic formula resulted in the solution of 3, we will be plugging in the numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3. We will plug in the numbers to replace t in the equation. H equals negative 16t squared plus 144. Once we have plugged in all our numbers, we now have some coordinates. Once we draw the coordinates on the graph, we can observe where the apple was at each second as it was falling down from the hot air balloon. As stated earlier, a vertex is the highest or lowest point of a parabola. In this case, the numerical vertex lies here. Since the parabola opens downward, the vertex is the maximum, or highest point of the parabola. The numerical value of the vertex relates to the real-world problem because it is the height in feet of which the apple was dropped from the hot air balloon. The solutions of a quadratic equation and the related x-intercepts are often called roots of the equation. Normally, when there are two x-intercepts, there are two solutions, x equals negative 2 and x equals positive 2. When there is one x-intercept, x equals 0, and if there are no x-intercepts, there is no solution. In this case, we have two solutions since our graph has both intercepts of negative 3 and positive 3. Before the video ends, I'd like to say, I'm sorry, Ms. Jansen, I underestimated how long it would take to edit the video. I'm so sorry.